The great chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with silence. The hall was so large that it could hold thousands of delegates. Yet in that moment, the silence felt heavy, almost crushing. Strange alien figures from hundreds of different worlds sat in their seats. Their faces and shapes were all different, some with scales, some with wings, some with eyes that glowed like fire. But no matter how different they looked, today they were united in one single decision. At the center of the hall stood the Speaker of the Council. His tall body was wrapped in shimmering robes that reflected the light of the chamber. His voice was cold, mechanical, and without mercy as he announced the judgment: Earth is hereby exiled. Humanity is no longer welcome in the galactic community. From this day forward, no human will sit among us, trade among us, or speak among us. Earth is cast out. The words echoed like thunder. 1,000 alien eyes turned toward the small section where the human representatives sat. Their faces showed no expression. They were diplomats, trained to hide fear and anger. But inside, their hearts were racing. They had come here with hope. They had come here believing that reason, logic, and diplomacy could save Earth. Instead, they were handed a punishment as heavy as death itself. Why had the Council chosen this path? Whispers moved through the chamber. Some said it was fear. Humans had grown too fast, too strong. They had spread from Earth to the stars in only a few short centuries, while other species had taken thousands of years. Their ambition frightened the older civilizations. Others said it was punishment. Humanity had fought wars in space, wars the Council had warned them not to fight. Some believed the Council simply hated the stubborn pride of humankind, a pride that refused to bend. The Speaker's voice cut through the whispers. The vote has been taken. The decision is final. Behind those words lay the truth. It was not just exile. It was a warning. To be exiled meant no trade, no allies, no protection. Humanity would be alone in a galaxy filled with enemies. For many, exile was the same as slow death. The human delegation rose from their seats. They said nothing. To speak would be useless. To beg would only bring more shame. Slowly, with quiet dignity, they left the chamber. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the vast silence. Not a single alien voice called after them. Not a single hand reached out in friendship. Outside the chamber, the human ambassador paused. He looked back at the towering doors that had closed behind him. His eyes were cold, his face pale, but his voice was steady when he spoke to his aides. They think they have silenced us. They think exile will break us. But they have no idea who we are. Back inside the chamber, the Council returned to its business as if nothing had happened. They spoke of trade agreements, border disputes, and minor wars. The decision to exile Earth was done, finished, and forgotten by them. But far away, on a small blue planet spinning quietly round its sun, the news was only beginning to spread. Across Earth, the message was broadcast on every screen. The words of the Speaker reached billions of people in their homes, their schools, their workplaces. The words were translated into every language, repeated again and again. Earth is hereby exiled. Humanity is no longer welcome. For a long moment, there was only silence. In cities, crowds stopped moving. In villages, people gathered in stunned disbelief. Soldiers in their barracks, scientists in their labs, children in their classrooms, all froze as the weight of the Council's words pressed down on them. Some wept. Some trembled in fear. To be cast out from the stars felt like losing the future itself. Generations had dreamed of space, dreamed of being part of something larger than Earth. Now that dream had been shattered. But in that silence, something else began to stir. It was not despair. It was not submission. It was something older, something deeper. It was the same fire that had carried humanity through wars, through famine, through endless struggle on Earth itself. It was the voice that whispered, "We do not kneel." The Council believed they had ended the story of Earth. They believed exile was the final word. But for humanity, this was only the beginning dot in the shadows of the Council chamber. One alien delegate leaned close to another. His voice was low, uneasy. "You think they will accept this?" The other delegate shook his head slowly. "No, they are humans. They will never accept." And far away, under the bright blue sky of their home world, billions of human hearts beat with the same unspoken answer: exile would not be the end. It would be the spark. The news of exile reached Earth like a storm breaking over calm waters. At first, there was silence, deep and endless, as if the entire planet had stopped breathing. The words of the council echoed on every broadcast, every channel, every device. Earth was no longer welcome in the galaxy. In the great cities, the lights of skyscrapers glowed against the night sky while millions of people gathered in streets, staring at enormous screens. Faces were pale, eyes wide, voices caught in their throats. The announcement repeated in cold, metallic tones: humanity was banished. In small villages, families sat together, their radios buzzing with translations, every language carrying the same cruel sentence. In orbiting colonies above the planet, in outposts scattered across the system, even on mining ships beyond Mars, the news arrived like a hammer blow. At first, there were questions. Confused voices asked why. Had Earth attacked? Had humans broken some ancient law? No answers came, only the same final words: the decision is made. The council has spoken. Shock spread like a wave. Old men whispered of ancient wars on Earth, when whole nations had fallen under the decisions of distant powers. Mothers held their children closer, afraid for futures that now seemed stolen. Some collapsed in despair, certain that without the support of the galaxy, humanity would crumble back into the dust from which it came. But not everyone reacted with fear. In the silence, other voices rose. Soldiers standing in their barracks clenched their fists. Exile, they muttered. We have survived worse. Scientists locked inside research stations looked at their unfinished projects and felt something awaken. So they shut us out, they whispered. Then we will go further than they ever dreamed. The first sparks of defiance flickered in hidden corners. In a classroom in New Shanghai, a boy no older than 12 stared at the screen as the teacher tried to comfort the children. The boy's small voice cut through the silence. Why do we need them? They fear us. That means we are strong. The teacher froze, realizing what had just been spoken aloud. In that moment, a seed had been planted in every child listening. In a military control room beneath the surface of Earth, commanders sat together at a round table. Maps of the solar system glowed on the walls. The words of exile still echoed, but no one looked defeated. One general spoke slowly, his voice deep and steady. They expect us to bow our heads. But I ask you, when has humanity ever bowed? Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Plans that had once been secret dreams began to take shape in whispers. On Luna Base, where miners worked in tunnels cut into ancient rock, men and women paused to listen to the broadcast. Many of them were poor, forgotten, living hard lives away from the comforts of Earth. Yet when they heard that humanity had been cast out, their laughter echoed through the tunnels. Thrown away, one of them shouted, "Good, now we belong to no one. Now we are free, even among ordinary people." The fire spread. In homes and streets, in factories and farms, eyes that had once held despair began to shine with something else, a hunger, a spark, a rising storm. Humanity was wounded, but not broken. The council believed they had ended the story with a single vote. They had no idea that on Earth, in silence and fury, something new was being born. The galaxy had given its judgment, but humans were already deciding their reply. As night fell across the continents, secret meetings began. Leaders, commanders, and thinkers gathered in quiet rooms. Some argued for patience. If we wait, the council may forgive us. But others, louder and sharper, shook their heads. Forgive. They fear us. They will never forgive. They only seek to chain us. This exile is our chance. And so the great debate began, not on alien worlds, but here, among the children of Earth. What path would they take? Would they surrender to despair or rise with defiance? In the deep hours of that first night, the answer began to take shape. Messages passed between military networks. Hidden factories came alive with the hum of machines. Old ships, once thought broken and forgotten, were brought back into service. Humanity was preparing, quietly, without fanfare. The world still looked stunned on the surface, but under that surface, a tide was moving. Above Earth, in the silent darkness of space, satellites recorded unusual activity. Fleets of cargo ships moved supplies in strange patterns. Energy signatures from secret stations flickered alive. Observers from other worlds, stationed to monitor Earth, sent hurried reports back to their governments. They did not understand what was happening, but they felt unease. One alien observer, staring at his console, whispered in dread, "They are not breaking. They are rising." And indeed, the people of Earth were rising. The Council had exiled them, believing this would make humanity smaller, weaker, easier to control. Instead, it gave humanity something no council could ever predict: unity. For the first time in centuries, old divisions began to fade. Borders seemed less important. Nations that once argued now spoke in the same voice. Humanity was beginning to move as one. The exile, meant to be a punishment, had become a spark, and that spark was spreading faster than fire through dry grass. By the end of the first week, the silence of shock had been replaced by whispers of determination. On every screen, in every city, in every village, people repeated the same words in their own language, but all with the same meaning: we do not kneel. The galaxy had cast out Earth, but Earth was not preparing to surrender. Earth was preparing to answer. The quiet whispers of Earth soon became something louder. In hidden rooms and underground halls, men and women gathered around glowing tables, voices sharp with urgency. The Council's exile had not broken them. Instead, it had carved their path. Plans were forming, dangerous plans, and every person in the room knew that the choice they made now would decide the future of all humankind. The ambassadors, who had returned from the council chamber, stood at the center of the gathering. Their faces were pale from exhaustion, but their eyes burned with fire. One of them spoke in a low, steady voice. "They believe exile will end us. They believe we will kneel. They do not understand what it means to be human." A silence followed, not of fear but of agreement. Generals leaned forward. Scientists adjusted their notes. Engineers, pilots, and strategists all exchanged glances. None of them doubted what came next. Humanity's answer could not be silence. It had to be action. The decision was not shouted. It was spoken like a vow. Earth would not bow. Humanity would rise. From that night onward, the world moved with new purpose. Factories that had been silent came alive with thunder. Sparks flew, machines roared, and the skeletons of ships long forgotten were pulled from dust and rebuilt. Children watched their parents leave home each morning with grim determination, not for wages, not for glory, but for survival. Everyone gave something. Everyone carried the weight. In laboratories deep beneath the surface, scientists unlocked secrets they had kept hidden for years. Technologies banned by the Council, weapons once sealed away, projects once thought impossible. All were brought back into the light. Sleepless nights became weeks of relentless work. Equations filled walls. Engines screamed to life. Humanity was racing against time, and every arm mattered. But it was not only steel and fire being built. A spirit was growing, stronger than any fleet. Across the nations, voices that had once argued and fought began to speak as one. Old borders started to blur. Rivals who had distrusted each other now shook hands. A unity unlike anything before was forming, born not from peace, but from exile, from the knowledge that the galaxy had cast them aside. If Earth was to stand alone, then Earth would stand together. In quiet corners, ordinary people felt the same fire. Farmers who had never left their land volunteered to supply the armies of tomorrow. Teachers told their students that they were the generation who would carry humanity beyond exile. Even those who had once dreamed only of simple lives began to see themselves as part of something greater. The galaxy had expected silence. Instead, they had awakened a storm. News of strange movements soon reached alien worlds. Traders whispered of human ships carrying unknown cargo, moving under encrypted signals. Patrol fleets reported seeing shadows in space, shapes too large to be ordinary freighters. Intelligence networks spoke of factories that never slept, of energy readings stronger than before. In distant chambers, alien leaders frowned as reports piled up. "What are they doing?" one asked nervously. Another replied, "They are preparing." Fear spread quietly, for deep down the older civilizations knew the truth. Humanity was not like the others. They would not accept their chains. On Earth, the people remembered their history. They remembered the times when great empires had tried to crush them. When tyrants had demanded obedience, humanity had always resisted. They had always fought back. And now, as stars watched from above, the same story was beginning again. In one vast hangar, a young pilot ran her hand across the cold metal of a ship being rebuilt. She had grown up believing she would never leave Earth's skies. Now, with the Council's exile, she knew her future lay among the stars. "They wanted us out," she whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and pride. "So we will go further than they ever dreamed." Her words spread like fire, repeated among workers, soldiers, and leaders alike. Humanity would not stay grounded. Exile was not an end. It was an invitation to rise higher. Even the children felt it. They watched their parents leave with tired faces but unbroken spirits. And they carried that spirit into their games, their lessons, their dreams. In their eyes, exile was no longer punishment. It was a challenge, and challenges were meant to be conquered. The spark of defiance grew brighter each day. It was in the roar of engines, in the sweat of workers, in the quiet determination of leaders who met in secret chambers. It was in the simple words spoken on every street, "We do not kneel," and the galaxy, though still blind, was beginning to sense what was coming. Shadows of fleets forming, the whispers of a people uniting, the unseen rise of a force no vote could ever stop. Humanity had been pushed away, but in that push, they had found strength. The Council had given their verdict, but Earth was preparing to give its answer. Factories roared louder than storms. Cities that once shined only with commerce now burned with the glow of foundries and shipyards. The exile had transformed Earth into a single beating heart of industry, pumping fire and steel into the veins of a rising future. The sound of hammers striking, engines turning, and sparks flying echoed through every nation. It was not chaos. It was order, fueled by a purpose that had united billions. On the coasts of old nations, massive shipyards stretched into the horizon. Structures taller than mountains rose, carrying the skeletons of warships not seen before. Frames of steel and alloy were pulled from the depths of the earth, crafted into vessels that would cut across the void. Cargo ships were stripped and reforged into battleships. Freighters were reborn as carriers of weapons and soldiers. Every dock, every port, every hangar was alive. In orbit, stations that once floated quietly as trade hubs now burned with light. Drones swarmed like insects, repairing, welding, reshaping. Old satellites, forgotten relics of past centuries, were captured and repurposed. They became eyes and ears for a planet preparing for more than survival. They became the foundation of something greater, but it was not only metal being forged. It was people. On every continent, soldiers drilled with relentless rhythm. Their boots struck the ground like thunder. Their voices roared in unison. They trained in deserts, in frozen fields, in orbital stations. Weapons once locked away in museums of old wars were studied and reimagined. New armor gleamed under the sun, designed not only to protect, but to inspire fear. Scientists carried the same fire. In underground labs and secret towers, experiments crossed the boundaries that once held them back. Engines that bent light itself, shields that could withstand suns, and weapons that whispered destruction were drawn from equations and prototypes into reality. The Council's bans meant nothing now. Humanity no longer asked for permission. Every mind worked as if tomorrow would be the final test. Ordinary people gave all they had. Farmers sent food to soldiers. Engineers worked until their hands bled. Children collected scraps of metal, their eyes shining with pride, whispering that they were building the future with their small hands. No one stood aside. The exile had given every soul a reason to rise. Not all work was loud. Some of it was hidden in silence. Deep beneath oceans, secret bases came alive. Black submarines carried weapons never before seen. In the cold stretches of space, mining colonies began smuggling resources directly to hidden shipyards. Even smugglers and criminals, once hunted, now found themselves welcomed if they could offer skills or supplies. Humanity had no luxury of turning anyone away. Everyone belonged. The whispers spread far beyond Earth. Alien traders passing through the system felt the shift in the air. They carried tales of lights in the sky, of ships gathering in secret. They spoke of human workers who no longer looked afraid, but proud, as if carrying a secret victory. Their words traveled to distant empires, where leaders frowned and asked the same question: what are they building? Fear began to creep into those who had voted for exile. For centuries, they had seen species accept punishment with bowed heads. But humanity was different. Instead of fading, they were becoming something else, something sharper. They were not waiting for the future. They were creating it. In the training grounds of Mars, young recruits stood beneath a crimson sky, staring at the rising fleet in orbit. None of them had ever faced an alien in battle, but their eyes held no fear. Their commander paced before them, his voice steady. They threw us away. They believed it was the end. Look above you. That is not the end. That is the beginning. His words burned into their minds like fire. The galaxy had thought exile would scatter humans like dust in the wind. Instead, it had gathered them like steel under pressure. And steel, once forged, could cut through anything. In the heart of Earth's capital, leaders from every nation sat together at a single table. Maps of stars stretched before them. Arguments rose, but none spoke of surrender. The only questions now were where, when, and how humanity would show its answer. Unity was not perfect, but it was strong enough to hold. They all understood. There was no going back. Above them, fleets grew larger each week. Ships that once seemed impossible now floated proudly in orbit. Engines screamed as they prepared for journeys beyond the Council's reach. The preparations were no longer whispers. They were roars. Humanity was readying itself to step into exile not as victims, but as conquerors of their own destiny. And as night fell across Earth, lights burned in every factory, every laboratory, every training ground. The world never slept. It was no longer a planet waiting for permission. It was a forge, shaping something the galaxy had never faced before. Those who looked upon Earth from distant stars felt unease, though they could not yet see the full truth. They sensed the storm building, but not its size. They thought they had silenced a world. Instead, they had woken a force. Humanity was preparing, not to beg, not to kneel, but to rise. Whispers began to move through the stars like shadows that could not be caught. In the distant markets of neutral space, traders spoke in low voices about strange things they had seen near the human worlds. Cargo ships traveling with no clear routes, mining vessels that vanished into the dark, only to return weeks later heavier than before. Fleets of drones moving in patterns no one could understand. It was not war, not yet, but it was not peace either. It was something in between, something that made the galaxy uneasy. On the desert world of Thalos, a merchant leaned closer to a fellow trader. "I saw their docks," he whispered. "Vast structures, glowing all night. Ships not like the freighters they once used, but larger, armed, waiting. I tell you, they are building something." His friend shook his head nervously. "You speak too loudly. The council forbids such rumors." But even as he spoke, his eyes betrayed fear. Reports arrived in the chambers of alien governments. Energy signatures rising near Earth, far beyond what was normal. Satellite paths shifting in patterns too organized to be chance. Entire factories gone silent, as if their work was hidden underground. One official laid the reports on the table before his leaders and spoke in a trembling voice. "Exile has not weakened them. It has made them stronger." The council dismissed the claims at first. They had seen other exiled worlds before, broken and starving. They thought humanity would be no different. "They are only struggling," the speaker said coldly. "Struggling before they collapse." Yet unease spread among those who listened. Some remembered humanity's history, their wars, their resilience, their defiance against impossible odds. A few asked the question none wanted to hear: what if they do not collapse? On Earth, the whispers of the galaxy were unknown, but the people felt the eyes watching them. Surveillance drones from alien spies appeared on scanners. Strange transmissions flickered across human networks. But instead of hiding, humanity used the attention. They let the galaxy see just enough to stir fear, but never enough to reveal the truth. Shadows of fleets were shown, then gone. Weapons were hinted at, then hidden. It was a game of smoke and mirrors, and the galaxy could not tell where illusion ended and reality began. Among the humans, the sense of secrecy became fuel. Workers smiled as they welded armor plates, knowing rumors would soon spread. Pilots trained in silence, aware that unseen eyes tried to measure their strength. Every action was not just preparation, but performance, designed to confuse, to terrify, to remind the galaxy that humanity was still there, on a distant moon. An alien spy ship observed a massive shipyard. Through its lenses, it saw ships rising from the docks, their forms dark against the stars. The captain of the spy ship recorded the images and whispered to his crew, "If these are real, if they are complete, the council has made a mistake." The images were sent back to the council, but by the time they arrived, the shipyard was empty, as if nothing had ever been there. Fear began to take root. Entire species, who had voted for exile, now questioned their choice. They had believed they were removing a threat, but instead they had given it time to grow. The humans had not begged for mercy, had not collapsed into weakness. They had gone silent, and silence in humanity was never a sign of surrender. It was always a sign of something waiting. Among the human people, hope was no longer silent. Stories spread across the planet and colonies of a coming day, when the council would learn the price of betrayal. Children drew pictures of great ships sailing through the stars. Songs were written, telling of exile turning into freedom. The whispers that once belonged only to the galaxy now lived in human hearts as well. Burning brighter each day, the council tried to contain the fear. They censored the reports, silenced those who spoke of human preparation. But silence only made the rumors stronger. Markets buzzed with stories of new human technologies, weapons that could break shields, ships that could cross impossible distances. Some of the stories were lies, but some were true. No one could tell the difference, and that was the greatest weapon of all. In the shadows of their own chambers, even the oldest alien empires began to prepare. Fleets were placed on alert. Borders near human space were quietly reinforced. Leaders who had once laughed at the idea of humanity becoming a threat now sat awake at night, staring at reports they could not dismiss. And still, Earth worked. Ships rose. Engines screamed. Factories burned through the night. Humanity did not care for whispers. Humanity was not building for fear. They were building for destiny. The galaxy had voted to exile Earth. But as the stars filled with rumors and shadows, one truth grew clearer each day. Exile had not ended humanity. It had awakened them. And in the silence between the whispers, in the quiet of the endless dark, every alien who thought of Earth now asked the same question. The question that burned like fire in their minds. What will humanity do next? The silence ended on a night that seemed ordinary at first. The stars hung quietly over Earth, and the hum of factories filled the air as it had for months. But deep within command centers, orders were given and entire fleets stirred awake. In the dark void above the planet, lights flickered across the hulls of ships the galaxy had only imagined in whispers. Humanity was ready to speak at last, not with words, but with action. The first wave of ships broke from orbit like arrows fired from a great bow. Massive engines roared to life, their trails blazing across the blackness of space. Carriers, cruisers, and sleek destroyers rose together, their steel bodies gleaming under the sun. They did not hide. They wanted to be seen. They wanted every alien observer, every spy, every distant satellite to carry the same message across the stars. Humanity was not broken. Humanity had become something greater. On Earth's surface, crowds gathered in the cities to watch the sky. They stood on rooftops, in streets, and across plains, their eyes wide as the fleets rose like constellations being born. For the first time since exile, cheers echoed louder than fear. Children pointed with shining eyes. Elders who had once wept in despair now stood tall, pride returning to their hearts. They all understood this was history. This was the answer the council would never forget. The message came soon after, carried on a signal powerful enough to shake every listening post in the galaxy. It was a simple transmission, spoken in the calm, steady voice of a human commander. You voted to exile us. You believed we would kneel. But humanity does not kneel. We do not beg. We do not fade. You cast us out, and in exile we found our strength. From this day forward, we walk our own path. We are not yours to control. The words spread across the galaxy like fire through dry fields. Alien stations froze as they received the broadcast. Council members sat in silence, staring at the hologram of the human fleet rising into space. Traitors whispered to one another in disbelief. Spies sent frantic reports that blurred with panic. Humanity had not collapsed. Humanity had risen higher. In distant halls, alien leaders gathered in fear. Some spoke in anger, demanding fleets to prepare for war. Others shook their heads, knowing it was already too late. The humans had revealed themselves not as victims, but as a force that could no longer be ignored. One elder alien, his voice trembling, whispered the thought all of them shared, but none wanted to admit. We did not exile them. We freed them. Meanwhile, the human fleets continued to expand. Formations stretched across the void, perfectly coordinated, disciplined, and vast. Each ship bore not only weapons, but the spirit of a united people. Soldiers stood on decks, gazing into the endless stars with fire in their eyes. They did not see exile. They saw a horizon that belonged to them. In secret bases across the colonies, new technologies were unveiled. Engines that folded space, weapons that pulsed with terrifying power, shields that shimmered like oceans of light. These were the creations once forbidden by the Council, now perfected in silence and unleashed in defiance. Humanity had not only prepared for survival, they had prepared for dominance. Ordinary people played their part. Workers who had labored for endless nights wept with joy as they saw the ships they built soar into space. Families who had sacrificed food and comfort now felt their struggles turn into pride. The fleet was not just metal. It was every sacrifice, every dream, every tear turned into steel. The galaxy could no longer pretend. The vote to exile Earth had not broken humanity. It had given birth to a new chapter in history. For the first time, the galaxy looked at humans not as allies, not as pests, not as a species to control, but as equals, or perhaps something more dangerous. And the humans themselves, they felt no need for permission. Their path was their own. The transmission ended with one final line, spoken like a promise carved into stone. We are humanity. Remember that name, for you will hear it again, across alien worlds. The words repeated again and again, each repetition spreading more fear. Some called it arrogance, others called it destiny. But deep in their hearts, even the oldest empires knew the truth. The exile had failed. Humanity had answered. Back on Earth, as the last of the new fleets vanished into the void, people cheered until their voices broke. Fireworks lit the skies, cities glowed with light, and the world trembled with the energy of a people reborn. For the first time since the Council's verdict, there was no despair, only pride and defiance. The galaxy had delivered its judgment. Now humanity had delivered its reply, and it was a reply that would echo across every star, in every tongue, in every corner of space. The exile had become a declaration. Humanity would never kneel. The galaxy did not sleep after humanity's answer. On distant worlds, leaders sat in silent chambers, staring at the human fleets recorded in glowing holograms. The images replayed again and again, the rise of warships, the broadcast that declared independence, the thunder of a people who had refused to bow. No one dared to say it aloud, but all of them felt the same chill. The exile had unleashed something they could not control. On Earth, the mood was unlike anything the planet had known for centuries. The air itself seemed alive with energy. People walked with their heads high. Factories still burned with endless work. But now there was joy in every strike of hammer against steel, every spark that lit the night. Children sang songs of the fleet. Artists painted visions of humanity's future among the stars. The words spoken by the commander, "We do not kneel," became more than a slogan. They became a promise carved into the heart of every human being. Yet beneath the pride, there was still tension. Everyone knew the galaxy would not ignore them. Fleets would come. Borders would tighten. Wars might follow. But fear no longer ruled. Humanity had looked into exile and found not despair, but freedom. Whatever the galaxy brought next, Earth would face it as one dot in the Council's chamber. Arguments raged. Some demanded immediate war, shouting that humans must be crushed before their power grew greater. Others urged caution, warning that striking too soon could end in disaster. The speaker's voice tried to hold the chamber together, but even his words trembled. For the first time in living memory, the Council felt powerless. Their vote had not ended Earth. Their decision had not bound humanity. Instead, It had shattered the illusion of control. Beyond the chambers, ordinary aliens whispered of the humans with awe. Merchants spoke of their courage. Soldiers, hardened by centuries of battle, admitted quiet respect. Even enemies could not deny the truth. Humanity had shown the galaxy something it had not seen in a long time: the fire of a people willing to carve their own destiny. In the dark of space, the human fleets expanded their reach. They were not waiting for attack. They were exploring, building, claiming new ground. Colonies rose on moons and asteroids, not with hesitation, but with boldness. Humanity was no longer asking permission to exist. They were spreading faster than the Council could watch. Every new settlement was a declaration: we are here, and we will remain. Among the soldiers, the spirit was the same. Young recruits trained harder than ever, not with despair, but with pride. They knew the risks. They knew the battles that might come. But they carried the memory of exile like a scar that burned brighter than fear. They had already faced the worst judgment the galaxy could deliver, and they had survived. Nothing else could break them, even in the quiet of night. When leaders sat alone and thought of the dangers ahead, they felt the same unshakable truth. Humanity was no longer bound by the Council. The galaxy had forced them into exile, but in doing so, it had given them freedom no law could take away. They were no longer chained by fear of approval. They were no longer trapped by the weight of old empires. They were free to become whatever they chose. On the first anniversary of exile, the entire planet stopped to remember the day the Council cast them out. Screens across cities replayed the words of the speaker: cold and final, Earth is hereby exiled. But this time, the words were met not with silence, not with despair, but with thunderous laughter. People filled the streets, cheering, shouting, waving banners of the rising fleets. Fireworks painted the night sky, brighter than ever before. What once had been a sentence of death was now celebrated as the birth of freedom. In space, the human fleet gathered information, larger now than anyone had believed possible. Ships gleamed in the light of the sun, their lines sharp and proud. A new broadcast was sent, this time not to the Council, but to every world that could hear it. The message was short, spoken in a clear, steady voice that carried across the stars. You cast us out. You believed we would fall. But we are still here, stronger, united, unbroken. We are humanity, and this is only the beginning. The words echoed far beyond Earth. On alien worlds, people stopped to listen. On Council ships, captains lowered their heads in silence. On forgotten colonies, oppressed species whispered with new hope. If humanity could rise from exile, then perhaps anyone could. The galaxy had voted to exile Earth. But exile had not destroyed humanity. It had forged them. It had sharpened them into something new. And as the fleets spread outward, as new colonies lit up in the darkness, as humanity walked boldly into the future, one truth was clear: the story was far from over. For the galaxy had tried to cast Earth aside. But Earth had become the spark of a fire too great to be contained.